They thought they could manipulate the truth, twist reality, and orchestrate a narrative where you would fall and they would rise. But what they didn't anticipate, what they could never prepare for, was your capacity to endure, your refusal to collapse under their psychological games, your decision not to be a puppet in their performance. And now their entire game has crumbled, not just failed, backfired catastrophically, and they're furious. Not because you hurt them, but because you didn't break. See, people like that don't play fair. They manipulate, deceive, exploit. They thrive on chaos, control, and calculated betrayal. They feed on your self-doubt. They poke at your insecurities like it's sport. They don't aim to win fairly. They aim to dismantle your sense of self piece by piece, until you question your own sanity. And when they see you stumble even just a little, they mistake it for weakness. They believe they've won. That's their fatal miscalculation. Because while you may have been shaken, you were never shattered. You learned, you adapted, and most importantly, you kept your integrity. You didn't stoop to their level. You didn't retaliate with venom or lies. You didn't manipulate back. You endured, you processed, you stayed grounded in truth while they kept dancing in delusion. And now the script has flipped. Now the truth they tried to bury is erupting in ways they can't contain. They're angry, they're confused. How could their tactics fail? How could the smear campaign not work? How could their silent treatment not destroy you? How could their deception not lead you to beg for their approval? They expected collapse. What they got was resilience. The most devastating revenge isn't rage. It's not destruction. It's growth. It's becoming everything they said you'd never be. It's choosing to rise when they prayed for your ruin. And now, every bit of progress you make, every moment of peace you reclaim, feels like a slap in the face to them, because it proves something they fear more than exposure, that you were never the weak one. They were. And that's what eats them alive. Not just that their manipulation failed, but that you thrived in spite of it. That you're rebuilding your life brick by brick without them. That you're finding peace in silence, meaning in pain, and power in detachment. Their entire identity was wrapped in the idea that they could control you, shape you, define your worth. But now, you've taken that narrative and set it on fire. They crafted a game thinking you'd never leave the board, but now you've walked away. And when you walked, you took your value with you. They're not just pissed because the game backfired. They're panicking because now people are starting to see it. The mask is slipping. The lies are unraveling. And their web of deceit is collapsing under the weight of truth they can't deny. And here's the most beautiful part. Your silence is louder than any argument. Your healing is more powerful than any revenge. Your growth exposes their games without you saying a word. That's what they can't stand. That's what drives them mad. Because there's no defense against truth lived out boldly. Let them be angry. Let them sit in the ruins of their manipulation. That's not your burden anymore. You've got something they'll never touch. Peace that wasn't handed to you but earned through fire. Strength that wasn't inherited but built in the wreckage. And clarity that came not from revenge, but from rising above the noise. So don't look back. Don't explain yourself. Don't waste time trying to prove anything. The game is over. You already won. Not by playing it better, but by refusing to play at all. That's where true power lies. In refusing to let broken people convince you that you are less. In choosing growth over vengeance. In becoming so unshakable that their worst cannot break your best. They're pissed. Good. Let them be, because now they have to live with the truth. They lost the one person who actually saw them, loved them, stood by them, and they destroyed that. Willingly, strategically, foolishly, and that decision will haunt them far longer than any pain they caused you. Because now they have to watch you become everything they tried to destroy. And deep down, they know they only played themselves. They mistook your silence for weakness, but it was strength in disguise. This is what happens when people are so used to control that they confuse composure with fragility. They assume that if you're not yelling, crying, or reacting, then you must be broken, or better yet, defeated. They think silence is the symptom of surrender. What they don't realize is that silence can also be a weapon, and in your case, it was a calculated refusal to engage with their chaos. It was the refusal to validate their dysfunction with your energy. They were expecting a scene. They wanted it, actually. They needed it to prove a story they had already written in their head, that you're unstable, that you're bitter, that you're out of control, because if you had exploded, it would have justified everything they told others about you. But instead, you were quiet, still, grounded. You didn't fall into their trap. And in that moment, everything started to unravel, not for you, but for them. You see, manipulators thrive on reaction. That's their fuel. That's how they know they still have a grip on you. If they can make you defend yourself, explain yourself, or break down in front of them, they win. That means their influence is still active. It means their game is still in play, but you gave them nothing. And that, more than anything else, was the checkmate they didn't see coming. They underestimated the weight of your silence. They thought silence meant you didn't know how to fight back, but you did. You just chose a higher road. You chose to conserve your energy, to protect your peace, and to let time expose what words never could. That takes more strength than most people realize, because it's easy to shout. It's easy to defend. It's easy to get caught in the web of retaliation and try to prove your side. But it takes extraordinary restraint to say nothing and trust that your truth will stand without explanation. And now, look at what's happening. They're agitated, restless. They can't understand why their tactics didn't work. They expected emotional explosions, desperate messages, or vindictive behavior, but they got quiet, they got distance, they got someone who walked away, not out of defeat, but out of self-respect. And that's driving them mad. They needed you to break so they could feel whole. They needed you to lash out so they could point the finger, but you didn't. You stayed grounded. You processed internally. You let their accusations float into the void instead of dignifying them with a response. And that restraint, that silence, that unbothered detachment, that was your power move. And now they're left with nothing, nothing to fight, nothing to react to, nothing to manipulate. That silence, it's haunting them. It echoes louder than any argument, because now they're alone with the reality they created. A reality without you, without your presence, your loyalty, your patience. And they're starting to realize that the person they pushed away wasn't weak at all. They were composed. They were strategic. They were powerful. That's the thing about real strength. It's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. And that's exactly what they misjudged. They thought loud was strong and silent was soft. They didn't understand that you had evolved past the need to prove anything. You knew who you were. You knew what they were doing. And instead of stooping to their level, you rose so far above it, they couldn't reach you anymore. That's why they're so angry. That's why they're unraveling, because their entire game was based on provoking you. And when that failed, they lost the one thing they thought they had, control. Your silence stripped that from them. Your indifference was the mirror they never wanted to face. And now all they have left is their own reflection, and the sinking feeling that they never had the power they thought they did. It's ironic, really. They tried to weaken you by breaking your spirit, and in doing so, they revealed the depth of your resilience. They didn't realize that some people don't need to shout to be heard. Some people don't need to fight to win. Some people simply walk away, and that act alone is the most devastating response of all. Because now they're the ones sitting with the weight of their actions. Now they're the ones replaying every step, wondering where it all went wrong. They're angry, not because you hurt them, but because you didn't fall apart. Because you didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing you beg, break, or crawl back. You just moved forward. And that's a consequence they never anticipated. Let them be upset. Let them rage in silence while yours speaks volumes. Because the truth is, your silence was never weakness. It was wisdom. It was clarity. It was the refusal to let someone else dictate your emotional state. And that kind of strength, that shakes people, especially those who build their identity on control. So no, you didn't lose. You didn't back down. You didn't collapse. You stood still while they tried to stir storms. You remained composed while they tried to provoke chaos. And in that stillness, they realized something terrifying. They never had control to begin with. They only had illusions, and now even those are gone. And you're free? They build their games on the hope that you'll stay small, that you'll stay unaware, that you'll stay trapped in the version of yourself that they can control. They bank on your confusion, your people-pleasing, your loyalty. They need you to doubt yourself because your doubt is their leverage. If you believe you're not enough, then you'll stay, you'll comply, you'll keep trying to earn love or validation from people who never intended to give it honestly in the first place. But the moment you grow, the moment you wake up, their illusion begins to disintegrate. Manipulators aren't terrified of anger. They're terrified of clarity because anger can be redirected, misinterpreted, or used against you. But clarity, that's irreversible. That's when the game ends. That's when the mask falls. Because the second you begin to see through the manipulation, you start to recognize how much of your identity they tried to shape. They weren't just trying to win an argument, they were trying to architect your self-image, and they hoped you'd never outgrow the cage they subtly built for you. They used subtle digs, passive control, twisted praise, and emotional confusion to keep you dependent, and for a while, maybe it worked. Maybe you tolerated it. Maybe you gave them chance after chance because you saw the good in them or hoped they'd change. You made excuses for their inconsistencies, minimized your pain, convinced yourself that your standards were too high, but deep down, a seed of truth was growing. You were becoming aware, and that was the beginning of the end for them. Because once you start growing, you start asking better questions. You start drawing clearer lines. You start saying no to things you used to silently endure. And every no becomes a crack in their control. Every boundary becomes an earthquake to their fragile ego. They'll call it selfishness. They'll call it betrayal. But what it really is evolution. You're no longer who they can manipulate. You've stepped into a new version of yourself, one that sees the game, names it, and refuses to participate. You're no longer chasing their validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You're no longer walking on eggshells because you realize that peace shouldn't come at the cost of self-betrayal. You're not addicted to their approval anymore, and that's what terrifies them most. And that's when the reversal happens, because growth doesn't just free you, it exposes them. It reveals the imbalance, the dependency, the quiet emotional power they had over you. It shows the world and them that you were never weak, just accommodating, that you were never broken, just temporarily blinded by loyalty, that you were never naive, just hopeful. And now all of that has changed. When you grow, their role in your life shrinks. Their words no longer hold the same weight. Their absence stops hurting. Their approval becomes irrelevant, and they notice. They notice when the text you would have answered instantly now goes ignored. They notice when your energy isn't available on demand. They notice when you start talking differently, walking differently, holding your head higher. That's what rattles them, not revenge, not anger, but your unapologetic growth. You see, growth isn't loud. It's not about proving something. It's about becoming someone you were always meant to be, but were too confined to access before. It's reclaiming the parts of yourself they taught you to suppress, your confidence, your intuition, your strength. And as you reclaim them, you realize something liberating. You never needed their approval. You only needed permission from yourself. That's when you stop playing small. That's when you start creating a life on your terms. And they begin to panic. Because people who manipulate others don't want equals, they want control. And your growth has made that impossible. You're no longer looking to them for direction, for love, for a sense of self. You've taken all of that back. And they're furious, not because you hurt them, but because they can't reach you anymore. They try to shame you, to guilt you, to bait you back into the old dynamic, but it doesn't work. Because you've seen too much. You've changed too much. You've learned what they never wanted you to learn. That real love doesn't require you to shrink. That respect doesn't come from obedience. That peace doesn't come from walking on eggshells. It comes from choosing yourself over and over, even when others don't understand. You're no longer afraid to lose them because you finally see what you were losing by keeping them. And that's the most terrifying realization for a manipulator, that their power over you was always borrowed, that the moment you grew into your worth, they lost their ability to control you, not because you turned cold, but because you turned inward. You started asking, what do I need? What do I deserve? Who am I without their voice in my head? And the answers didn't lead you back to them. They led you back to yourself. This is why they're so upset. This is why they lash out, because you grew beyond their reach, and growth is something they can't mimic. It's earned, it's fought for, and it's yours now. So let them be angry. Let them rage in the shadows of their failed manipulation, because the truth is you're no longer playing small. You've expanded, you've elevated, and now the version of you they thought they could control doesn't even exist anymore. They planned your breakdown, not your breakthrough. That's what makes your healing so threatening to them, because people like that, they operate with precision, they calculate the damage, they anticipate your reaction, they plant seeds of self-doubt so subtly that by the time you feel like you're unraveling, you think it's your fault. They aim to fracture you emotionally, slowly, consistently, until the only thing you can see is their version of you, broken, dependent, fragile. And they expected you to stay that way. They never planned for you to get stronger. They never expected that their cruelty would become your turning point, that the very wounds they inflicted would become the birthplace of your transformation. They thought they were writing your ending, not realizing they were merely the prologue to something far more powerful. Because when you begin to heal truly deeply from the inside out, you stop being a character in their narrative. You become the author of your own. They don't know what to do with that. Healing, real healing, is not glamorous. It's messy, it's quiet, it happens in moments they'll never see. It's crying alone at night when the world thinks you're fine. It's rewriting the beliefs they drilled into your head. It's facing the version of yourself they created and choosing to become someone different, someone whole, someone independent of their chaos. And when you emerge from that place, not bitter, but wiser, not vengeful, but more discerning, that's when the game truly ends. They see it in your posture, in your eyes, in the calmness of your voice. You're no longer trying to explain yourself. You're no longer trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You're no longer trying to hold together